Tangerine Dream celebrate their 40th anniversary. The band also released their latest album, Madcap's Flaming Duty. I'm John Kirkman, and today we're talking to Edgar Froese about the brand new album, Madcap's Flaming Duty. We'll also be playing tracks from the album. Edgar, new album from Tangerine Dream, Madcap's Flaming Duty. It's due in early 2007, which coincides with the 40th anniversary of Tangerine Dream. First of all, tell us a little bit about the album. First of all, the title, Madcap's Flaming Duty, and I noticed that the album is dedicated to Syd Barrett. He was obviously a huge influence on you.
No, I wouldn't say it's my hero, but it's definitely a person I really have to think of regarding my early years. You know, I remember back in '67 when Interstellar Overdrive, one piece of The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, was released. We played a little underground club in Berlin. I played it for about 3 months every night. Bum bum ba da da bum bum ba, and so there was. Then I got into Syd Barrett. Of course, I got into the Floyd, but I first got into Syd Barrett, and found out what it is all about with that guy, and where he's gotten his influences from, where he learned from, and he wasn't not just what a lot of people think a crazy lunatic, taking drugs and playing some crazy type of music. He was a very intelligent person, understanding a lot of music theoretical things, and was into the Pythagoreans. He didn't know about the octaves, about the oriental scales and all that sort of thing. So I was a bit ashamed, hearing after his death in July this year, that people just put him into that drug LSD type of corner, And so that's why we thought, okay, let's give him a bit of a tribute, So, what else you can do? Just to make sure that somebody who is very honest in music tries to think about someone who was honest in his field of music as well.
Do you think that you personally could recognise the artist, though, in Syd Barrett, whereas
Absolutely.
The tabloid papers kind of want to home in on the sensational aspects of his life, which weren't necessarily sensational until they made them sensational?
I tell you, an artist's life is always sensational for himself in the first place because he is living it. He is truly living it. And an artist doesn't care about how painful it is, like the big artists like a Beethoven and Mozart in music or the big painters and writers, they didn't care really about how the life runs in the end, They had to do what was kind of an inner order for them to do, right? And our rock artists today, they're complaining about a limousine in front of the hotel, sending them back, There are not 8 seats, there are just 7. I don't play tonight. That's the difference between...
That's a great way of putting it. Tangerine Dream have been at the forefront of electronic music for a very, very long time. And the band have always done what they want to do, or in fact, you have always done what you want to do, despite some criticisms in the past And I'm sure there's going to be criticisms in the future, but ultimately you stayed steadfastly true to your artistic ideals. Yeah?
You see, when we released a record called Phaedra back in 74, it was the first, chart topper for us in the world, We released it to Virgin in England. A week after the release, I opened the Melody Maker, used to be the headlining musical paper in Britain at a time, and the first huge sentence I read was written by a guy, Steve Lake. I even don't know if he's still around, but anyway. So, eat more shit, 1 million flies can't be wrong. I said, hey, what a great opening. Hey, the world is ours. So, what you can do, and years later, you are called kind of a genius founder of something very new, and then a couple of years later, again, they're trying to grab you and putting you into the garbage with whatever you do. So you never can count on the public voice.
There's been a number of albums from Tangerine Dream over the years that have been, should we say, slightly contentious as regards the fan response and critical response. And I personally like the great many albums and the diversity of the albums that Tangerine Dream have released. This new album, I think, is going to stir up a lot of interest, both good and bad, amongst the fan base, which I think is personally good for an artist. Would you agree with that?
I agree, absolutely, because, an artist, I would say, has lost his artistic part of his life, if he is just overproducing himself again and again, and is repeating what he called whatever, new or different art forms, So it's that kind of shock which is needed, to make people aware, hey, wait a minute, it's still going on, you're still there, and so you have, as an artist, as a true artist, you always have to listen to your inner voice, and if your inner voice, tells you, okay, it's good to do that, okay, you got to do that, and you are a servant of the music as an artist. You are not the person who is just the hero for others, even not the hero for yourself. You just have to serve the art form you're into.
What if you and your beauty stay? Will not they stand your affection? I will not their pictures be image like of saints' perfection. Only can be fighting thee by your reason purest light. Bids you leave such minds in me. Who is dead this dark night? subjective. With time still the affection grows. In the faithful turtle door, wireless and are you here? Be not yet those fancy change. Here and you find change in me.
When I first heard this album, I made the mistake personally of thinking, okay, a new Tangerine Dream album, I have a certain idea of what it's going to sound like.
Yeah.
And I was completely floored by it because I thought, this is great. This is a new album with vocals, which is very unusual for Tangerine
yeah.
Dream. You've done it on a couple of occasions,
Yeah.
and it's been kind of mixed, the reception that those albums have got. But
Yeah.
I really like this album, and again, it's bringing out an entirely new side to Tangerine Dream. Would you agree with that?
I agree, absolutely. It's a bit like, on previous records, except maybe the Dante series, which was planned to do with vocals, which had to be done with vocals because of the lyrics and the transplantation of the message. But apart from that, in the past, we always acted like, a guy who want to marry a certain wife, and he is a bit unsure, I want to marry her halfway, it's like, like a wife would say, I want to get pregnant just half the way. And so this time the difference is that we were absolutely sure what we want to do. There are vocals on it from wall to wall, and we are happy with it, and that's about it.
The lyrics on the album are drawn from 17th and 18th century poets. Now, Tiger featured lyrics from William Blake, and again, William Blake is featured on this album. Yeah. How do you approach putting lyrics and poetry like that to the melodies? I mean, would you decide on the poetry first and put the music, or is it the poetry to the music afterwards?
First of all, it's maybe the most English record we ever did, and it's not talking to an English gentleman, right? It's simply because it's more my country than anything else, not grown up there, not born there, but the feel, the atmosphere, the sort of togetherness on a mental level. It's so high that I always felt more like an English person than I did like a German one, a country I'm born in. Anyway, so I loved the old English lyrics a lot through all the times. I guess William Blake, as a painter and writer, is such an outstanding character. Even, and that's a problem, even if the kids have to learn all that poems in school and so, yeah. And they try to get rid of it later in life, But it's the same like in Germany when they had to learn about Goethe and Schiller and that sort of guys, And they have to forget it, because it's rubbish, it's the old, But it's the opposite. I mean, he was a revolutionary man. He gave Britain more than they even would think about, And so we've chosen those old writers instead of going with the down-to-earth lyrics of today.
Hear the voice of the bard, who present and past and future sings, whose ears have heard the holy word. That walk among ancient trees, calling the leaves that sound and weep in the evening dew that might control the starry palm, that might control the starry palm, and falling, falling like renew. Oh, earth, return, arise from out the dewy grass. Night is warm, and the morn rises on the slumbering mass, rises from the slumberous mass. Turn away no more. Why with you turn away the starry floor, the watery shore is given the tale of break of time.
Do you think, listening to the lyrics, the lyrics actually are timeless? Because,
Correct.
and great
Yeah.
poetry always is.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. You hit the point. It's what we try to be in music, it's a good piece of art is timeless, has to be timeless. It's born in time at a certain date, going back to Syd Barrett, that's what he said, always. It's a piece of art produced now. If it would have been produced 5 minutes ago or 5 minutes later, it would have sounded differently. That's what he said. A very sympathetic sentence. And so that's the truth, So whenever you do things, you have to choose a certain point in time. But the outcome has to be timeless. So it's,
It must be very hard to and quite daunting, I suppose, to try and make something that is timeless, although it's encapsulated in the time that you're recording it and creating it, something that has to stand the test of time outside of the initial creation.
Yeah, but that's the funny thing about all art forms, and if you read those biographies of people through the centuries, there's always a saying, you never can think about it. If you start thinking about it, it's like balancing on a string. If you think about the highs, above the ground, falling off the string. As long as you have a focus point right in front of you, 10 meters or a mile, it doesn't matter. And you forget about all the rest. Just doing it, and then you're stepping into something very specific. It's an atmosphere which is outside space and time. And then you start mentally moving into something else. And then you are able to create something which is more than you intellectually could, prepare yourself with.
You said that there are a lot of English poets in here, but there's a notable American poet in here, Walt Whitman. Why did you choose Walt Whitman, who is an incredible writer?
Walt Whitman, to me, is the greatest American writer, because he said so enormous things about life and death, which are the two components we have to go through, and so I didn't understand through all the years why people left him so far behind, any other lyrics that we're talking about. And he is just a great man. I mean, I can't read all his poems right now, but The Leaves, for instance, it's a collection of all his writings, and one should go through it, very open-minded and without any preconception ideas about what writing has to be, modern writing, ancient writing, whatever, Just read it, take it into you, and that's fine. It's the same like when I've heard first time the latest Gilmour record, I was quite happy about it because, there is a guy who grew up with electronics, and now can express himself the same way, even with acoustic instruments or with his voice or singing or meaning behind the lyrics. And I believe it's the same what I said about 40 years ago, Whatever you can't blow on your comb, right, you can't produce within your orchestra. So it's in you, inside you, or it's even not there.
1 hour to madness and joy. How furious, how confine me not. What is this that frees me so in storms? What do my shouts and lightning mean? How to drink the mystic delirium deeper than any other man. Oh, savage and tender achings, return them to you, my children. Oh, draw you back to me, to return paradise again. Oh, something unproved, something in the trance. Oh, madness unmoved, oh, trembling to escape all of me from others' anchors and homes, to drive free, to love me.
If we look at one of my favourite tracks on the album, it's a traditional Irish tune. And that is probably 180 degrees away from what a lot of people would imagine Tangerine Dream would do.
Absolutely.
And when that must please you, that I've said that, then I can tell by looking at you that you're quite happy with that reaction. But I was very surprised when I heard it. And it is one of my favourite tracks on the album.
Yeah, it's very funny, that song, Lake of Pontchartrain. It's I was a fan of the Chieftains. right? And the Dubliners and that sort of thing. You know, when I first came to Ireland many years back, you know, I loved the atmosphere. I didn't understand the Irish, you know. I didn't understand the culture properly. It would be a lie if I now would say I did. But I did love the old, the very old, the heritage of what's still there, you know. And so I always said to myself, okay, one day, whenever, you know, may you find a right place where to put an Irish song in. It has taken years and years, and now that's the case. I would put it in, and Thorsten, my colleague, had a few people in Berlin who are very deeply into Irish music, and they did help us, and so that's why it's on the record.
But it has a very genuine and organic Celtic feel, which, again, I would say is completely removed from what I certainly envisaged Tangerine Dream doing. So, I mean, you've tapped into that, I have to say, which is, it's very good.
It was so much fun, I tell you. It was so much fun because, you see, what means being an electronic band? We're still using electronic equipment. Of course we do. And without calling myself very arrogant, but I would say we use it quite perfectly, you know. But even going back into other musical directions, it's so refreshing. It's so refreshing because it doesn't matter what you do, you know, whether you're a true artist or if in music or in writing or painting, you know, it doesn't matter really.
As long as you've got the feel, I guess.
Exactly.
It was one fine March morning, I bid New Orleans adieu, and I took the road to Jacksontown, my fortune to renew. I cursed the foreign money, now credit
again, Percy Shelley, I mean, an incredible writer, and sometimes, I think, underrated.
Absolutely underrated. And the song, it goes, about the intellectual beauty, what's intellectual in beautiness, And that's so attractive that, in my view, people from the past were much more into the subject, and found out more about the subconscious, principle and things than the writers do it today, And the matter of fact is they're very simple. They can be understood, But we take Shelley or James Joyce, for instance. Joyce hardly can be understood by most of the people because they can't read between the lines. They can't understand, the transformation of the language, But Shelley is very simple. So everybody can understand it if he or she wants to, and that's why we chose it.
The album has a thread moving through it, from my point of view, anyway, having listened to it. And it's a hugely consistent album. In fact, probably one of your most consistent albums for the last 35, 36 years.
That's true.
I personally think that this album is going to attract a completely different audience that Tangerine Dream already has. And I'm sure there are a lot of fans that have been with the band for a great many years who will like this album. But I think you're going to draw in a new fan base with this album. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say it's a very pity that most of our audiences have been male, which is all right, but where are the women's? And what we've heard through all the years is they can't cope with the sort of technical environment, I don't know. I don't want to make a comment about it because I know a lot of women who are in techniques and computer work and stuff, and they're very intelligent. They can use it, and not all of women are dumb housewives. I'm absolutely against that. So, but fact is, as long as you have a voice over the music, or transport a meaning by using lyrics and so on, you attract more or less a woman's mind than you do without it. It's a fact, I mean,
a lot of people, and I say a lot of people, a lot of critics have said over the years that Tangerine Dream are a very cold band because the electronic music by its very nature is very cold. And yet I disagree with that completely because I feel that there's always been a warmth and a human element to Tangerine Dream's music, and it's probably more evident on this record than it has been on quite a few of your previous records.
Yeah, I can't follow the description cold or warm or romantic or kitsch or aggressive. Or you see, finally, what it turns out to be is you hear what you are, right? And so, therefore, it matters much more in what condition you are at the moment you are listening to music, and that's what will be reflected, And if you're in a very romantic situation, you will find out that a lot of music will be very attractive. You, under circumstances, wouldn't even listen to it, So it's up to the listener, I don't like that sort of, headlining styles,
So people will take from the album whatever they will regardless.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm sure plenty of people across the world will really enjoy this album, and I do think you're going to certainly add to your fan base with this album. I think it's an excellent album. Thanks for talking to us today.
Thank you very much.